18 certificate, some of these images are not safe for work. So there are images of a sexual nature, obviously, because I'm not going to give a talk about sexual libido. I'm just going to fiddle around with the lights for a second, because I've got some video to show. This room is, oh, that's a bit much. Oh, that's really? I'll do. Okay. Is that all right for recording stuff? You can.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. You don't need to see me. You just need to hear. All right. So, sex machines. Right. The rise of artificial sexuality. Artificial sexuality is not a term that is widely used. That's because me and my research group made it up. But we think it sort of summarises what we want to do. So. I'm going to start with this quote by Brian Pfaffenberger, mostly because I love the name Pfaffenberger. But to create a new technology is to create not only a new artifact, but also a new world of social relations and myths. And arguably, we already have those myths in place, because the idea of a sex robot goes way back into the classics. And I'll have a look at a bit of that in a minute. So these have been around. So sci-fi, when cybernetics, the whole field of cybernetics kicked off in the 40s. Something, of course, the potential for how we're going to use these superhumans in the future, these half machines, half humans, or all machines. And of course, sex was, every science fiction book went down that route, extended it to say, well, we can have sex. Usually, gynoids, machine, female versions of sex robots. So, I'll show you a little video now. This is a video about cognitive systems. So this work is really interdisciplinary. I work with philosophers, psychologists, cognitive scientists, computer scientists, lawyers, ethicists, artists, sci-fi writers, healthcare professionals. Basically, they're all involved in this. But the key component from where I've come from this is cognitive systems, which is the idea of creating artificial intelligence, systems that are intelligent and that learn. So this is the video from EU Cognition, EUCOG, that explains what their drive is in general in terms of robotics.
We need robots that can work with us, and rescue systems that can adapt to the environment. We want driverless cars that anticipate the need to act, intelligent spaces that learn from experience, and robotic hands that can deal with the unexpected. That's why we build cognitive systems. Intelligent machines that can make sense of situations they have never encountered before. They can't be pre-programmed completely. They need cognitive capacities such as perception, memory, anticipation, learning, and development. The European Cognitive Systems Research Community is changing the way we understand natural systems and build artificial ones. We research cognition and build intelligent adaptive systems that can serve society in many different ways. Many scientific disciplines share the mission of understanding and building cognitive systems, but every research activity works on parts of the whole solution. We aim at integrating all this research and help facing the real challenges of artificial cognitive systems. In the workplace and at home, in hospitals, factories, and throughout the city, the systems we use are becoming cognitive. EU Cognition, European Society for Cognitive Systems.
Okay, so that's a little bit about what's happening, certainly Europe-wide, where people are at. So there's a big drive from European funding and in the EU to develop these robots that can learn from their environment, can interact with their environment. And there are separate projects looking at how we build a human brain, in terms of computer, how we model a human brain. This is slightly different. I'm saying, don't worry about the human brain. Don't worry about replicating human consciousness. I'm not going down this road today. That's another discussion altogether. This is about how we can create machines and robots that can understand the environment and react to it. Now, care robots are already out there, and they're being widely used, and especially big in Japan. technology is rebelling, and the laptop is... Okay, so here are some... Here are some care robots. This is a telepresence robot that can go around hospitals, and you've got a telepresence hookup, so you've got someone talking, via Skype or whatever, so you can interact with patients. So you can have a consultant based at a different hospital who's an expert, and they can come and interact with the patient without actually physically having to be there. So it's basically just a Roomba with a Skype screen on top. I'm sure it does more than that, but that's and this is RoboBear. RoboBear is another care robot that can lift people and carry them around and move them around safely. Safety is key. And they test it extensively before they let them loose on humans. This is Paro. This is one of my favourites. Paro is a robotic seal. And I'm gendering Paro and saying that it's a male seal. It was created as a companion robot for elderly people in care homes in Japan, about aging population, needing sort of company, things like that. So we've got Paro. And Paro is so unbelievably cute. And it charges by putting a dummy in its mouth. That's but already you see this attachment forming. So there's a big attachment between people and machines that care for them and that they form a relationship with. Okay, we're not going down the route of sex with Paro, all right? That would be wrong. That would be really wrong. And we'll get onto the wrongness of being wrong. So Paro is there as a lovely, cuddly friend. Okay, so already you see this attachment starting with machines, this attachment to this robot that and it's got all this kind of anthropomorphism going on. Wait, anthropomorphism, the animal version. People are the fluffiness and the cuteness, and they can really identify with this. It's like having a cuddly toy or a real animal that responds to it. Great, and it doesn't, shit everywhere. Like it. So these machines are machines that can care for us, but they're not machines that have much in the way of sentience themselves. Okay, they don't think for themselves. They're programmed to do tasks, and they may learn from their environment. They may learn how to encounter things, but they're pretty much just being instructed to go and adapt to a physical approach. Respond in certain ways. We're still very limited in terms of AI. We're still very limited in what robots can do. And of course this week AlphaGo was in the news because it's the first time that a computer has taken on a Go expert and won 4 of the games that aside from it. Anyway, so AlphaGo, that's incredible. That's really incredible because chess is done, chess is old school. Go is the complicated one. Although I would say that AlphaGo, yes indeed, is a very, very, very clever machine. But it's rubbish at Pictionary, okay? So it's very, very task specific. You could train AlphaGo to get good at Pictionary probably, but it's dedicated to a single task, and that is the case with these care robots as well. The big difference between the big gulf between humans and replicating that kind of behaviour is that this is very task dependent, specific. Okay, so. Going way back to sort of the origin, where is this idea of having sex with robots come from? So we have evidence. I used to be an archaeologist. We have evidence of sex toys being used way back to the Paleolithic, okay, where they found kind of sex toys made out of antler and carved stone and representations of figures that may or may not have be sexual. But the written stuff, history, we've got the classics. This is a Renaissance depiction of Pygmalion, the sculptor, and his statue. He sculpted this beautiful statue out of ivory, and he fell madly in love with it. He said it was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, and he wanted, he desired her, and amazingly he kissed her. She came to life, and she became arguably the first sex machine, the first sex robot, perhaps. But there are other stories as well. So there are lots of stories about automata. There's the sort of Hephaestus who had an army of sort of robots. There was a Chinese king in ancient China who had a life-size soldier built for him. Da Vinci came up with the idea of a knight in armour that was automated as well. But this one is particularly interesting because it focuses on the idea of a human-built figure that is there to be desired. So that's interesting, and we see this going then right through, as I said, to the sci-fi of today, where there's a lot of films and things out, and I'll show the trailer of Ex Machina in a moment, but all these films that centre around this beautiful, desirable robot, at some point even disembodied, like in Her, the voice in Her, that the main character falls in love with. Even things like Blade Runner, that was beautiful replicas. So there was this kind of focus, there's this male gaze on robots that are desirable. It's very, I sound very close to what I said, it's a very heteronormative male view of the technology. Now the one thing I love about Goldsmiths is it is such a good place to do this kind of research, because you're bringing in people from all these different disciplines, and no one bats an eyelid because there's always something crazier going on in another department. So I went this summer, I was putting together, or this winter, I was putting together this bin for funding, more of that in a moment, and I was looking up sex robots, as you do, on the work computer, and before, up to then, it had all been fine, I was getting access to all the adult sites legitimately for work, and suddenly I was blocked, and this message came up saying, "There's adult content, your computer is blocked, your provider is blocked this." So I thought I'd better go and see IT help desk. I was slightly reluctant to do, so I went along kind of, I've got a problem with my machine. And they went, "Oh, what is it?" So I'm trying to access some material that won't let me see. And I went, "What's it on?" I went, "Sex robots." And they went, "What? Sex robots?" And I said, "Oh yeah, we had someone in the other day, couldn't get access to beheadings." I'm the nice one. So so it turns out there was a block. I don't know if you found that, apparently there was a campaign by the Students' Union to get this block listed. I don't know if it has been or not. They brought it in without telling any staff. Down with this sort of thing. We need access to this stuff, The world needs to see what's out there, mostly. So we see this, we see these kind of tropes coming up of the beautiful, desirable robot. So this is Ex Machina. Has anyone seen Ex Machina here? Okay, so I'm going to show the trailer for those of you who haven't seen it. The basic premise is you've got this kind of programmer culture, and there's this Honcho who's head of something that's a mix between Google and Facebook, and he creates this artificial intelligence that is also amazingly beautiful at the same time, and he gets one of his underlings to come out and he basically is manipulating their interactions, and sees what happens with this guy who goes out to interact with this robot. I'll show you the trailer and then we can talk about it. So back before they were in the new Star Wars, Dominic Gleeson and that guy, what plays Paul Devlin? That's part of the problem, right? More of this dinner.
Over the next few days, you're going to be the human component that's on your test.
One day the AIs are going to look back on us the same way we look at fossils.
Hello.
How do you feel about her?
Oh man, she's amazing.
You're impressed.
Yes.
Do you want to be my friend?
Of course.
Now the question is, how does she feel about you?
Do you think about me when we are together?
Did you give her sexuality as a diversion tactic?
This is your insecurity talking. This is not your intellect.
Did you know that I was brought here to test you?
Oh,
Does Ava actually like you? Or is she pretending to like you?
Nathan isn't your friend. You're wrong.
Wrong about what?
Everything. Do you want to be with me?
Can we talk about the lies you've been spitting me?
What lie? What lie?
You have to help me. What will happen to me if I fail your test?
Right, so, the interesting thing, I put together work on this, and one of the people that I was getting as a contributor to my work was an advisor for Ex Machina, and another person who does inside science and really form. And so I went to meet him to talk about this because he's interested in representations of cyborgs and robots in film. And he said, what did you think of the film? And I was like, because visually it's very stunning, it's really beautiful, but I had a bit of a problem in that I think it is not a particularly friendly to women film. And so I said, I didn't think it was all that great in terms of feminism. You go, what? This is a feminist film? And I thought, oh no, it's really not. And basically the premise being that she uses her sexuality in order to manipulate her way, to try and manipulate her escape from the environment she's in. But he felt it was, it was a bit of a pastiche of the whole programmer thing and, a bit of stand-up. And he said, but she wins in the end. Well, spoiler. She doesn't necessarily win in the end. But he said, but she has success. I'm not going to say what success is. I thought, well, that's not, why is that a measure of success? I don't think that's a particularly good way of doing it. So this fed into it as well. We're looking at the attitudes of people towards these representations. And that's a very interesting thing, as you will see now, because this is the existing robot technology for sex dolls, for sex robots. This is what they have you believe you're buying. This is what you're actually buying. Now this centres entirely around the Roxy doll, a female mechanised sex doll. There is a male version called Rocky, apparently. Now, again, this is very much the entire research. The research that's been done on sex robots to date has been about people getting attached to female robots. Okay, so it's all about the straight male. It doesn't go any wider than that. So we say, well, it's kind of a second wave of sex robots, basically. So this is a little clip of Roxy True Companion.
I'm Anthony Laser from Asylum.com, and right behind me at this very moment, inventor Douglas Hines is introducing the world to the Roxy True Companion, what he's touting as the world's first sex robot.
This is a multi-year project, and we have been spending many, many years working on it. Roxy True Companion is a self-contained robot. She has a computer, touch sensors, pressure sensors throughout her body. So for instance, if I touch her here,
I don't know holding hands with you.
She wants to hold hands with me. This is not just a sex toy. This is a companion. We dealt with a psychologist to understand what makes a strong bond between two people. And sex is a very minor part in that equation. Sorry. I'm sorry, Roxy. I'm just trying to tell our fans what you're up to.
I know a place you can put that hand.
And she'll actually...
Really?
The largest sex organ that every person has, the brain, right? So that's the hardest challenge for us, is to provide the artificial intelligence experience where you're actually conversing and creating a relationship with an inanimate object. If you touched her as Farrah, if she was in frigid Farrah mode, she would probably not want to do things.
Now, what would she tell me if I switched her into skank mode?
Yes, and there is a skank mode. It's called wild lending.
Now, from an ethical side, say we're talking about a true companion here. Would it be cheating on my significant other to have a Roxy True Companion?
That's an excellent question, and it's up to debate.
Can Roxy make me a sandwich?
not mixed sandwiches. She can tell you to where to go to get a sandwich.
It doesn't seem that everyone here in the crowd is sold on whether or not this is the true world's first sex robot on the world.
This is quite possibly the most retarded thing I've ever seen.
The most retarded thing?
Her hands kind of look plastic. I was kind of worried about that. But I think for somebody who maybe, is homebound, it would be good.
So Roxy could be a caretaker in a way.
I'm impressed. I think it looks great.
What's the most impressive thing about it to you?
I don't know. I just thought it just looks really fun,
Yeah. Fun for like interaction, like you're talking about, or does it look fun to bang as well? Would you ever want to have sex with it?
If she was nice to me beforehand and she let me cuddle her afterwards, definitely not.
To a person's appendage. That's what you're effectively doing when you're engaging with her. So it's a very erotic experience.
It sounds like it. If she was my wife, would she keep the last name True Companion, or could we hyphenate?
As if she's going to change her name. Right. So, yeah. Not the kind of Pygmalion sculpture that we might have hoped for. Not the gyno that's being sold in sci-fi. And very much rather weird and a bit creepy. And not female friendly whatsoever. So anyway, this is the current state of the art. So we can hope it's better. We hope that we will contribute to making these things better. And in a moment, I will say why we feel that this should actually happen. It's not just for these commercial purposes. There's more to it than that. It's deeper than that. So when I started putting together the research proposals that I was doing, a few weeks into, I just submitted a bid with the Wellcome Collection, Wellcome Trust, and we got shortlisted, which was great. So we were up for £1 million against 4 other groups who were doing worthy things, not sexual robots, worthy things like dementia and sexual robots. But we were very excited to be shortlisted. And just the following week, out came the campaign against sex robots. So this sort of got launched in the BBC AI week, and I thought, hang on a minute, that's a bit weird. So what it turns out, it is 2 academics, Eric Devlin and Catherine Richardson, and who do robo-ethics. And their argument is that sex robots are essentially a form of sex work that exploits and objectifies women, and that they're very unhappy with the idea. Again, this is approaching it very much from this male heteronormative view. So they said that's definitely a big problem, that it's exploitation, that it's perpetuating this idea of discrimination against women, viewing women as if they are solely there for sex, especially when they are sex workers. So I wrote a rebuttal, just a general kind of article for The Conversation, which is an online academic journal, informal news thing. And it went viral. It got picked up by a fucking on Science on Facebook, and suddenly I had 500,000 hits on this article that I'd thrown together in an hour and a half. It's like, whoa. So people were really captivated. And the interesting thing was the reaction. So they say never read the comments, but I read the comments. Especially ones that said, ooh, she must be into really weird stuff. Who are they to judge? So I read the book, but the interesting thing was the reaction. So people were saying straight off, this isn't research. This is not a real area of research. And then further down, they started debating it. So they were saying, well, what if this robot was a child robot? What if this robot could be used by people who aren't able to go out, meet people, and have sex with them? And so all these debates of, is it right? Is it wrong? Should these people be prosecuted? Should they be doing it? And suddenly the people in the comment section were having these arguments with each other about whether or not this was a good thing, and all the ethics and law came into it as well. I thought, well, this is research. There's work here. People are interested, and it's not just a shallow kind of laughing at the sex robot thing, which is a bonus. Laughing at the sex robot. So anyway, we put together our bid. We didn't get the £1 million, sad times. We'll get it from somewhere else. If any of you have £1 million and you wish to fund some groundbreaking research, now would be a good time to tell me. Anyway, we put together a video for our bids, so I'm going to show you what we've done and how we're approaching this. So this is our kind of second move sexual roles.
Robots are everywhere. Working for us, working with us. We use them. We exploit them. We need them. Should we be worried? Should we learn to love them? Sex robots capture public imagination.
Okay, yeah. Isn't that already happening now?
I can't quite understand how they would do that.
There's no way, no. I can't even imagine the idea. I dislike it.
We should be, open-minded.
And I think perhaps it'd be rather marvellous. It might cure a lot of problems.
Yeah, if we were a child, then it would be a bit like pedophilia, wouldn't it? But then, yeah, I guess you could use it, to stop people from abusing children.
Yeah, that would be crossing the line a little bit, I think.
I suppose it could cut down disease, transmission of disease.
Well, it depends on the robot. Would be like.
For a quickie, it's fine.
It would be strange. It would be weird to explain to your girlfriend that you have sex with a robot.
It could make a move on you.
So it has to have realistic features and everything.
I don't think I would want it to have face and hair.
I think I'm okay for the time being.
Robots we care for. Robots that feel. Robots. The welcome hub. Rethinking the future of intimacy.
Yeah, there's some German pole dancing robots there. I don't think they were made for that particular purpose of, titillation. So we wanted to go a bit deeper into exploring this whole subject, and that's when we talked to the cognitive scientists. So this kind of particularly hippie, trippy looking picture is actually just sort of, we got off the internet, it's not to show that sexual behaviour is a nice example of goal-driven behaviour, okay? It's a fundamental motivator in many, many forms of life, right? So this whole get on the planet, procreate, pass on your genes. So sex has got a really, really strong influence over how we behave. And if you think about what goes on in our brains when it comes to sex and sexual behaviour, we have all these hormones that we act on that cause different stimulations, and then it affects our perception and our thinking, our cognition. So we think that's really interesting because people just overlook it when it comes to modelling human behaviour. It's left out. And this plays such a huge part in human existence. Why is it being ignored? Okay, mostly because people say, well, that's trivial, we want to do other things. The thing about, so there's a move in AI, there's different approaches. So the one that Goldsmith's very interested in is the idea of embodiment. Okay, it's the idea that we understand the world through our interactions with the world. You do not get more embodied than having sex. Okay, that is really an embodied experience. So we want to look at it from a cognitive point of view. We want to examine what is going on in our brains in terms of sexual behaviour, in terms of sexual identity, in terms of gender identity. Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on that is very much still open to debate. And how then, if we were building a cognitive system, would we incorporate that? Now the psychologist on our team, she's interested in sex as well-being. Sex has got a raft of well-being measures, okay? It's been shown in many different studies that sex improves people's well-being. There are, if it's good. It might not be quite so good if it's really awful sex, we're not even good on it. So we thought, what about sexual therapy, okay? So sexual surrogacy, for example. What happens if you perhaps have a disability that means you're not able to find a partner or have sex by a regular means? Why can't there be some kind of surrogate for you to enjoy? Now the flip side is, so that's the nice positive sides of sex robots, but there's the dark side that someone alluded to in the video, which is what what happens if you've got someone like a sex offender? Can it be so after their treatment to find out if they were likely to reoffend by putting them in these virtual situations with the, say it was a paedophile with a virtual child. So the thing then that comes out of this, there's lots of questions that come out of this. You know, there's good sides and bad sides, but no one's asking really what these are. Now we know the technology is coming. You know, it's ready for here. So there are law issues, there's policy issues, and there's ethical issues. So we have a lawyer working on this as well. So and they're looking at what is actually the status of the robot? Is it property? What if it had some form of sentience? Would it have any rights of its own? That's quite a long way off. Could you name a robot in divorce proceedings? You know, my partner cheated on me with a robot. Is it adultery? Or is it just a form of unreasonable behaviour? Could a robot commit a sex offence? Could you commit a sex offence against a robot? But interestingly, the most current ones, that's sort of thinking a bit ahead, although maybe not with the whole, you know, having a sex robot and thinking about the implications on your relationship. The interesting one is data, right? So, you know, think about the kind of data we're worried about in terms of mobile phone data, in terms of smartwatch data, in terms of smart TV data. A sex robot is going to be some very interesting data about your habits and who's going to be able to access that, how is it going to be stored, how is it going to be processed. There's some very sensitive data going on, what happens to that. And the problem with law is that it doesn't keep up with the technology. It's always a step behind. So we need to be thinking about that now to be able to be prepared for this stuff happening. So I mentioned briefly gender. Okay, this is for anyone who watches Futurama. This is a bit where Bender the robot, who is categorized as male. So this is the whole interesting thing about how do you categorize your robots? Are they male? Are they female? Do they have a gender? Bender became a wrestler, and this was his wrestling gear. But I found this really interesting because when I was trying to find this picture, and I found a site about Futurama, and it said Bender male dressed as female robot, and I thought, what does that even mean, male or female robot? That's, you know, that doesn't make sense. And yeah, I immediately was giving power of the state. I was saying he, I could have said she. So we anthropomorphize, we put our views onto machines. Now, things like gender that are getting, you know, there are online wars going on. I'm staying away from these things on Twitter because it's absolutely very, very sensitive and very political in terms of gender identity. What if we had these robots as a sort of a blank slate where we can start to have discussions around what it means to have gender, or to have sexuality, or to feel things about sexual behaviour? And that's the kind of thinking that we can do that in a space that is then more neutral, perhaps, to examine what our own preconceptions are about these things. So what is a sex robot going to look like? Are you going to build it yourself with some interchangeable parts? Who knows? But at the moment, you've seen the sex doll, you've seen Roxy. And Roxy is essentially just a doll that can speak and do a little bit of adaptation to what you might not like. So a few years ago, a couple of years ago, I had an MSc student who did her dissertation on artificial sexuality, and she was the one who prompted this discussion. We'd all been talking about it in the past. This is all the good research comes out. And she theorized a sex toy that would work using biofeedback and would learn what you liked, and she theorized how this would work, and she asked some questions about artificial sexuality and what was happening. So she was really ahead of the game thinking about this. So we asked a few people, you know, but we did that vox pop. We also asked people every time we tried to get them involved in research, and we said, what would your sex robot look like? You know, someone said, it would have hair. No, it wouldn't have hair. Well, it might have hair. You're thinking, what things people focus on? It's very telling. So people were saying, well, how would you design it? So today, or a couple of days ago, I found this brilliant study It's a wonderful example of big data and data visualization. This is from a study called Down the Rabbit Hole. And it is an analysis of 1 million sex toy sales from Lovehoney, which is a sex toy company. And basically he got access to their data, and he got access to 45,000 reviews about the sex toys. And he coded them up, so if they had a male sounding name, he would mark them as male, because you can't, obviously it doesn't record if you're male or female buying this. If it had a male sounding name, he recorded as male. If it had a female sounding name, he recorded the buyer as female. And then cross-reference that with the reviews to find out how likely it was they were male or female. So he was able to do a gender breakdown. It was about 95% accurate, worked out. So he has this data set of 1 million sales divided up by gender. He started to look at all the patterns that emerged. And lo and behold, what you know. Well, it's some very interesting stuff. I do go and read it. It's really, really good. It turns out that the classic male sex toy, which is the fleshlight, Google it from home, maybe. If you're not aware of what these is. It's essentially it's an orifice. These are the different types of orifices you can get. And so men like their sex toys. The classic male sex toy, and this goes for straight men and gay men, is with a type of opening. Okay, a realistic-looking opening. Women basically just would like a rabbit vibrator, which is, you know, almost anatomically there, but with a little bit extra. So, how are you going to decide what your sex robot looks like? Can you build one, modular sex robot? Should it be human looking? Should it not? These are all unanswered questions. This is the exciting stuff. This is what we get to explore. Okay. So this is from I think from PhD Comics. But robots that love, robots that are just in so we came up with a number of questions that we're going to look at. So this is very much an open page. Okay, this is the time to get involved in this research. The questions we have, right? So how does sex shape the way we think, the way we understand? So we as humans, how does it influence us? Okay, and we know there's a really wide spectrum here. We know there are some people who are asexual. It's not a big part of their lives, if it's a part of their lives at all. We know at the other end there are people who think it's a primary part of a relationship. We know there are people who are monogamous. We know people who are poly. We know people who, there's all sorts of different things going on. In terms of sexuality, again, there's so much data out there of people from all shapes and sizes and walks of life. So we've got a lot of data out there on human sexuality. How do we feed this into what's actually happening in cognition and in technology? Can we and should we replicate that in an artificial system, in a cognitive system? I think we should, but then I'm incredibly biased. How accepting is society of these human-like technologies? So there is this idea of the uncanny valley where the more human you make someone, it doesn't quite look human, and so it becomes repulsive to you. We are at that state. I mean, Roxy's kind of a bit like that. You just know, not human enough, really a turn off to a lot of people. Evidently someone is buying her. Maybe they have a thing for it. And actually there is a thing, I'm not kink shaming. There is this thing where people like to dress up, become androids themselves as part of their sex life. Each their own. But it is a thing. I know this because I've recently reviewed a paper on it. It's very interesting. I learned a lot. So, if a robot is going to act in a human-like manner, which often is a goal for these robotic systems, should robots be provided with a sexuality? Should they be provided with a gender? What role is there for sexually active robots in human healthcare? So, companion robots, we've seen examples. Could you extend that to sexual health? Why the hell not? Or sexual surrogacy. How is this going to be accepted by society? How are our interactions with machines shaped by an impression of sex or of gender? How do we react to something given our tendency to anthropomorphize? And how can we look at diversity in that case? Now, one of the other things we thought about was, what if, so that's the human-robot interaction. What about a robot-robot interaction? What if robots were sentient and could interact with each other? Could develop feelings for each other. The next thing you know, they're replicating. Could they? Because we kind of said this as a joke. We're like, oh, maybe they could have sex and they could replicate. They could have some kind of sexual reproduction. And we thought, well, actually, humans don't have to have sex to reproduce, okay? So, you know, there's IVF, there's that. This is, why the hell not? You can get 3D printers that can print themselves, right? We used to say we can't bring a form of sexual reproduction for a robot. That's a bit more out there, but it's just something to think about. So how should we approach it? How do we ethically approach these things as well? And one of the key questions for us then is about the law and policy. We know the technology, there's already technology out there. We already know there are obscenity laws. If you create computer-generated images of something like child abuse, you can and will be prosecuted for it. It's illegal. Now, building a doll of that sort, there was a case in America a couple of weeks ago of a man who is being prosecuted for owning a childlike sex doll. So we know the technology is out to build these things, but the law needs to catch up and decide what it's going to do. So what impact is there going to be if robots can behave sexually, or we can behave sexually towards them? What are all the nuances of that? Right. So the idea is, overall, that if we sort of look at ourselves, look at our own attitudes, and the influences that we have from sex, and then feed them into this development of artificial intelligence. Because I hope that I've convinced you that it is a worthy enough area of research. As you know, I find it a very fun and exciting area to work in. But why are we doing this? Because it's as batshit crazy as some of the other AI stuff that's going on out there, in my opinion. But there are some fundamental questions here, fundamental research questions that I want to see answered. And we're at the start of it. So hopefully, this can go somewhere. Okay. Thank you very much.
Very easy access to porn, and it like really disturbing their views on sex and kind of like informing their sexual education more than something like school could. It might be an interesting field to look at, this idea of kind of like, I don't know.
Definitely, I think definitely that is something that there's a lot of research coming out of, and in fact the fleshlight slide I was showing back there, you can actually buy your favourite porn stars orifices and model them on it. But there is such a huge influence, and I think yes, we should be very cautious about that and look at just how much technology and a lot of technology has come about because of the porn industry, streaming video online, credit card transactions online, those sort of things. We owe porn a big debt in terms of technology. It doesn't mean that it's a good thing at all. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot to be learned from that. Go. Hey. Okay. No, don't be shy.
What countries have given rights to robots?
I don't believe any have yet.
I think South Korea has given rights to robots like 7 years ago. And then I'm just thinking that if we're waiting till we have robots that are self-conscious about their own existence, shouldn't we not let them decide what their gender is?
Yeah.
Because otherwise we would just be imposing whatever our society. Well, we will be finished with it anyway. That's the end goal, to keep them outside living and growing. But we will be imposing to them what we are. So if they are self-conscious beings, should we not wait till that moment arrives? Or
yeah, I think it's what you said. I think that if we have machines that are sentient, and it depends. I mean, the ideal of human level consciousness, I think, is just so far off. But in terms of sentience and self-awareness, I don't know. I think that's one of the interesting things to look at. What does it mean to have that gender? This is the whole thing why I'm always really terrified to start to talk about gender, because it's so nuanced, so sensitive, and so it's a touch paper thing, and people have very different views on it, which is why I think it's interesting in terms of a robot. What does it mean to have a gender? What does it mean to identify as something if you have this blank slate of a machine? But then we always impose our own views on it anyway. So I think we're not going to get away from imposing our own views, but yeah, ideally, a machine is subject.
What do you know what like industry in the field has produced the like best AI yet? Because like we're talking about like companies creating AIs for sex, and I feel like that's kind of going to come like behind AIs that are created for other fields.
It is, because if you look, and it's very specific stuff. So things like AlphaGo, or things like driving cars. They're often very specific tasks, and I think the sex robot thing is just people are just laughing at it, going, "This is not a remotely, sort of AI-based yet." Best, I'm not sure. I don't know.
So is it an AI when it's just completing that task?
It doesn't. The idea, well, it depends. It's a really big. There's different goals. So there's the thing like you have machine intelligence in that it can learn from its past behaviour and predict what it can do in the future. It's kind of a vague way of doing it. Right up to people who want to recreate human consciousness. So at the moment, these are very specific tasks like making autonomous weapons, making driverless cars, making machines that can play Go. They're all really, really specific.
Because like those machines like wouldn't have genders.
No, well.
So why should your sex?
No, exactly. Well, that's it. I don't even know if we should give a sex robot a gender at all. No, they don't. But we, when you think of AlphaGo, genuinely, does anyone think of AlphaGo as having a particular gender? The Go name? No? Because I find myself automatically going, oh, AlphaGo must be male. I don't know why. I just get, it's probably the nuances of saying alpha like alpha male, and I see. Yeah, it's totally, there's a human tendency to do this and to anthropomorphise, and I think it's hard to get away from that. But I don't see why we should have it for robots at all. Maybe there's an alternative. Maybe we can construct new genders. Yes.
Since this lecture seems to be more centered in this machines or robots that look like humans. And I thought it was interesting when you said that we question how do we react to something given the tendency to anthropomorphize. And then it's funny because we're talking about like giving it sexuality or gender, and you said like we are imposing on them. But to give like the robot right to choose, that's also anthropomorphizing a robot. Like the robot's rights. Sorry?
We're giving them more shapes.
Yeah, we have at the moment. We do. We give them their shapes. Can we make a robot, a machine that can choose its own shape in the future?
I wonder. I didn't want to go like too much on that, but I was thinking more. What do you think, or is it part of your research? Not this type of robot, but like those that are called the fucking machines. They use like mainstream kink porn. And they really. Formally, it's like they're like sculptures, but they're very centered on the machinery aspect to it. They are the opposite of anything organic.
They are. So for
they
anyone,
really work on that roughness and the mental, and they have a lot of like the narratives in this sort of porn. Not all of them, but sometimes are very sci-fi, like this alien they came to. So is this like a separate field, like you have the ones that look like machines and the ones that
I don't think it's a separate field at all. I think that comes under sort of what do we expect these things to look like. So for anyone who doesn't know what fucking machines are, go and Google it at home. You're essentially talking about a very kinetic metallic structure with essentially a dildo on it. And it's it is not an embodied thing. It's very much a machine, a structure. It's not got that sort of human form, which is why I think why do we actually need a human form? I don't know. I think that's really interesting. That falls under that area. What are we expecting our machines to be like? And even for everyday tasks, what are we expecting robots to look like? Those care robots were built to look vaguely human, but why is that the case?
That also sort of questions what does it mean care, because it feels like the care robots need to look like something that we are used to, or like a fluffy seal, or like a person. But then that would come as the fucking machines don't really care because they look like rough machines and they just fuck you like in and out and that's it. But you know, that's also like, you know, a sense of care. It's broader than that. I mean, perhaps there's a lot of care and damage, but still like feels like a, you know, that's like when you go and like when you research about fucking machines, it's much about that. You don't talk about care when you talk about those.
That's very, and that's
interesting. Because
that is interesting because there are different approaches. So I actually was part of a panel called Fucking Machines, and it was held in a former sex shop in Soho that is now an art gallery, like Soho. And there was a woman there, Trudy Barber, who works on teledildonics, which is the VR side of, it's a thing, it's the VR side of sex toys really. So it's about people can hack their own sex toys, can communicate in VR, virtual reality, online. There's these communities that make these all. And she was talking about as well about, what is the, sort of how people are constructing these things and whether or not there is, whether that's an area of research to look at what is the difference between a sex toy, which is sort of, you know, what makes it into a sex robot, and is it just this bit that it can learn? And even if it can learn and react to particular situations, it doesn't have to look like a human to do that. Is it that we prefer that? I think there's huge questions that are really open here.
Yeah. Do you think it is that care is more associated to this sort of shapes and forms, more animal or humans instead of the other ones?
I don't know. I really don't know, because I think that's just there's been a very narrow design agenda. I think that it's going down the route of what's familiar. I think that people aren't really pushing the boundaries on this yet. Which I think they really could. And there's lots to come. Yeah. Oh, sorry, someone else who hasn't asked a question.
No, I found it quite interesting with the graph you have up here, actually, that the female sex toys don't really look like penis.
Yeah, I know. It's like big. Yeah.
It's completely like artificial in a way, whereas the male sex toys try to like.
Yeah, and I love the fact that 1% has gone for alien. That's really interesting. It is very interesting looking at the breakdown between the attitudes. And we know that women and men respond to robots. Not talking about sex here, they respond to robots in different ways. There is a different response, and that's obviously I'm saying it's most likely a social conditioned response. But I find that quite telling. So, you know, the women have gone and they've optimised the penis. Which is side of it here. But yeah, it's really telling. And I get to do lots of reading around this subject. It's very interesting. And I read a lot of fanfic and sometimes Reddit. But one of the things is they're very interesting when there's crossovers with sort of cyborg or robot slash or fanfic going on. It's really interesting the amount of people who get very carried away around about that. So there's definitely a market for it. But as I said, there's this thing where people see the whole android part as part of the sexual experience. So these are people who want to have sex with robots, not with a robot that looks like a human. So there's that aspect of it as well. Fascinating.
You've been mostly talking about having kind of like a one-on-one experience, like a robot and a person, but you haven't mentioned it, or like there's any research on couples and like, or group activities.
No, I know, that's true.
Is that being done?
It's not being done right now. I mean, you could bring on to it. That is part of the teledildonics community, I think, because I don't know how much there is in terms of group sex with that. That is something that I will ask Trudy next time I see her. But yeah, absolutely. What is really going to be the fundamental purpose of these machines? Is it something that you use like a sex toy, or is it something you form a deeper attachment with, or is it something that becomes a companion? Has it got a therapeutic purpose? it's really open. It's very open still. So yeah, I mean, why the hell not?
I guess, I mean, for us to see, you're kind of looking way more into sort of AI side than the actual machinery, but I was wondering if your research expanded at all into sort of, I think it's sort of being, it's quite big in the Netherlands for the development, working on these machines, sex machines, but controlled by humans, the idea of being remote.
Yeah, and that's
stuff. So it's sort of how it coincides in that sort of separation between the physical machinery and the AI side, the sort of controllable side, and sort of with virtual reality and whatnot. Wondering, how he thought those sort of.
Yeah, so it's kind of as an intermediary between people. Yeah, I mean that's another option. I think this is still such a field that's in its infancy, and the potential for the possibilities are kind of infinite. I think that's a really interesting thing to kind of.
Yeah, I guess sort of like, what do you think? People obviously are intimidated when they first hear or see about these things, especially that sort of rocks and convention.
Yeah.
And what do you think people are? Do you think people are initially mostly intimidated by sort of looks, or the sort of idea that it's a robot and the ideas behind them? Because I guess they're both sort of quite big touch subjects.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. This article, this is really interesting. But when he looked at the reviews, it's this kind of interesting thing about progression of what people buy. So it's kind of more and more. There are different strands. So there are people who will be very accepting of this technology straight off, and there will be people who are very, very conservative and salty about it. Maybe conservative is a large C, but I don't know what they're up to. But there's this. There's such a wide variation, and I think, there are the sex toys, there are the gentler options to kind of get you into that whole area. So I mean, perhaps there would be what to do that. So.
So all these sort of research seems to be physical with like robotics, etc. But what about has there been any research in terms of like just the mind, in terms of like you mentioned the movie Her? So
yes.
Has there been any research in terms of that?
So Her is a really interesting one. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it is where the main character falls in love with a disembodied female voice. But that disembodied female voice, although it lacks the embodiment, it is a very sexy female voice. And I wonder would it have that attachment if it was a very robotic robot voice, like Stephen Hawking style? would it have been quite sexy? So I think that's interesting. But yeah, but we have attachments to technology at the moment. If you think about smartphones, they're very personal things, and it's very unlikely that if someone asked if they could use your smartphone, that you really hesitate before you let them. People have become very attached to the technology they own, and it becomes a very personal thing. Forming relationships with them, we know that they don't have to look human in the body to have a relationship with something. But does it help? I don't know. This is still, again, these are all open questions. That's the thing. That's the exciting thing. We've got those things to look at. But just, there and then there.
I was kind of shocked that the Roxy doll was so crap. Admittedly, I haven't done much research on it, but I would have assumed that the state of the art in something like this would have been a lot better, just because there's so much money in porn. So that was kind of the first thing. It's like I'm surprised, and maybe it's interesting to think that at some point the research community could be helping the porn community, which is interesting. But then also on the flip side of that, I was wondering if you'd thought about approaching the porn community for funding.
Funny enough, I've been thinking about that actually. It's something I might have to try and run this past the Devlin ethics committee. It's actually really tempting because that's where the big bucks are. And even actually was thinking of so Monica, who did her masters on this, who was interested in the biofeedback sex toy. I was thinking of approaching a sex toy company about that, because that would be something that, that's a year-long research project to come up with something, prototype it and see if you can manufacture it. Would be so interesting. Yeah.
I was just wondering how consent works with robots. and because obviously they're made for you to have sex, and they're always readily available.
Yeah. And if sentience becomes a thing, then that's a huge issue. Consent is a huge issue if a machine is capable of consenting or not. And I know that sounds quite far-fetched, but what level of sentience does it have to achieve before that becomes an issue? I think that's really, really interesting. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question if anyone's got it.
Also, but not just for the robots, but for us as well, like how that skews our perception of consent and the relationship that we have with sex, because a lot of times, well, hopefully all the time, if you want to have sex, you have to ask someone else to have sex with you.
Yeah.
And sometimes that might be a no, and you have to accept that. And
Whereas a machine,
that you have.
I mean, that.
But is that something that they're working towards?
That's something that we're certainly looking into, the idea of what is the influence? What's the social influence of these things? Is there that issue where, you know, it becomes, like the company with sexual robots, is it an issue? Is it going to change
But if it's going towards getting a robot that can give consent?
Well, the idea is that the main drive of AI is to have machine sentience, robot sentience, so that robots can make decisions on their own and think for themselves, which is the way, you know, there are examples of self-awareness. There's one example from last year. It's still a kind of logic stage, but that's going to hopefully come at some point, in which case, so yeah.
It's just a quick question on the law side. Say, for example, with the AI, we have AI's influence on law, as in AI's creating new laws or it's strictly human-based.
Yeah, that's a good question. At the moment, human-based, but thinking about the technology that's emerging, there are massive implications for it. I'm thinking about things like driverless cars, where there's going to be, like, who do you prosecute if something goes wrong? What happens to your sex toy that goes, or your sex robot that goes wrong? When it goes wrong. But yeah, at the moment, humans making the laws, but what happens if there's AI getting input into that is another question. It's maybe one day happen.
Round of applause for Kate. If you're interested in more tech talks, interesting like this,